afternoon to all of you. We are, of course, entering into the fourth thematic session of this conference. Good evening to people in some parts of the world. Good morning to others. We're very excited to welcome all of you to this session on experiments in curriculum designing for online classes. My name is Rajkumar. I'm the founding Vice Chancellor of Jindal Global University. I would like to extend a warm welcome to our moderator, who is a very distinguished colleague of ours, Professor Shruti Pandey, Associate Professor of Legal Practice at Jindal Global Law School. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Professor Valentina Volpe, Associate Professor, Co-Director, Master in Human Rights, Security and Development at the Faculté, Libre, Droit, Université, Catholique, Lille, France. We also have Professor Magali, Julian, former head legal languages department at the Faculty of Law, University of Montpellier in France. We also have Professor Shane Kilcommins, head of the School of Law at the University of Limerick in Ireland. Professor Jhuma Sen, Associate Professor in the Global Law School of Jindal Global University. With those words of introduction, I would like to now request colleague Professor Shruti Pandey to moderate this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Are you able to see me?
Yes, everybody is able to see you and hear you. Go ahead, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. On behalf of the OP Jindal Global University, India, greetings and very warm welcome to the session 4 of day 1 of the 3-day global conference on reimagining and transforming the future of law schools and legal education, confluence of ideas during and beyond COVID-19. This session is especially focused on experiments in curriculum designing for online classes. My name is Shruti Pandey, and I'm an associate professor at the Jindal Global Law School. I'm honored to especially welcome our distinguished panelists for this session, Professor Magali Julian, Professor Shane Kilcommins, Professor Valentina Volpe, and Professor Jhuma Sen. We are grateful to each of you for accepting our invitation to grace this panel. We are very keen to learn from each of you on this exciting part of the transformation we have undergone. As we can all see, the COVID pandemic has carried more than the complex multi-layered challenges and crises. It has also brought along the gifts of new ideas and insights from the responses that we've all been forced to formulate. It's clear that while some responses will last as long as the pandemic lasts, there are many innovations and models that would outlast the pandemic simply because they've shown us better ways of doing what we do, which in the case of a university and a law school is teaching, co-learning, and knowledge building. Into the 9th month of the declaration of this pandemic and towards the end of the first totally online semester for most of us, we thought that now is a good time to take stock to be better prepared for the times ahead. For this session, we are looking to learn from the experiments undertaken by the institutions across the world, represented by our 4 distinguished panelists, particularly towards designing the online curriculums, catalyzed by the challenges as well as opportunities from the pandemic that range from keeping the courses relevant, relatable, and stimulating, being amenable to technology for overcoming space barriers and asynchronous learning mode, while at the same time keeping the learning community vibrant, connected, and together. This is also an opportune juncture for us to fundamentally review the raison d'etre for the content as well as presentation of the courses we teach towards more than imparting knowledge as knowledge becomes available at the click of a button. These imperatives are not just for the duration of the pandemic, but necessary adaptations for the enduring new realities of our times, and the pandemic has only hastened these transitions. I'll not take too much of the time in this introduction. We have just 60 minutes to explore this important area in this session. Certainly too short a time. So for the sake of concrete takeaways, I hope we would hear from each of the panelists at least about 2 broad thematic aspects of your own experiments with curriculum redesigning for the online classes. So I've just divided the questions in 2 parts thematically. Firstly, your experiences in the past pandemic months and the challenges you faced. And secondly, the innovations you experimented with and the learning and insights that emerged from there, which you could share with us. We could use the next 40 minutes for this discussion. For that, I request the panelists to keep your responses to each of the two broad questions for about 3 to 4 minutes each. And then we should have about 10 to 15 minutes for the Q&A at the end. So let's get started. First, on your experiences and the challenges you faced around redesigning and readapting the curriculum for online teaching during the pandemic. May I also request each of you to begin with sharing some more information about your institution and yourselves as foreground to your presentations. So I'll go clockwise. I first invite Professor Magali Julian. She's the former head of the Legal Languages Department of the Faculty of Law at the University of Montpellier in France. And I hope I have the pronunciations right. Professor Magali, please tell us about your encounters with the pandemic and the challenges around the curriculum design. And please first also say something about your institution and yourself. So all of that in about 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Pandey. So I'm teaching legal English, and I was the former head of the Legal Languages Department in Montpellier University. That's in the south of France, Montpellier at the Law Faculty. So I would say a word about how we adapted to this pandemic and to this challenging period for all of us and for our students as well. Quite a stressful period for everyone. So in terms of adaptation, the beginning of the year was a bit complex because we started with face-to-face classes in September, and then in October we were told to have only half classes coming, and students were coming every other week to have white spaces and social distancing for our students. And finally, now we are all locked down, so we are completely online teaching. And so there's need for this constant adaptation. So that's the first point I wanted to make. I'd like to maybe to share with you in terms of innovative innovations we've put in place. First, some of our colleagues decided to, in fact, give their lecture from the university, and there were cameras in all the auditoriums, and the students could just follow the lecture. So that was the first step. But then more and more we are on Zoom, like here today, and with online classes. So we discovered, in fact, the possibilities of these online classes. There are some advantages. We try to, especially in legal language, we try to maintain this form of interaction with the students, which is for us essential. And so we use a lot one of the possibility given by Zoom, for example, with small breakout rooms where a student can, do pair works to work for debates, to yes, pair work or debating. But also something we use a lot is sharing the screen with audio or video content, and then have a discussion with the students. So that's for the regular online meetings with the students. But then since March, we considered that, especially in legal language, it was necessary to develop a new degree, which was completely online. And so we created this interactive course, which is on which there are some recorded videos and interactive activities that the students do on their own, at their own pace. And they have essays to post, and they get some feedback on that. So I think it's important to do sort of a blended learning with some activities they can do completely, in autonomy, at their own pace, and definitely the need to maintain a relationship with the students regular every week, and to also for the general empathy and the necessity of interaction, live interaction with our students. So that's maybe the 2 points I wanted to insist on first. Thank you.
Thank you for those opening, and we can probably come back and speak a bit more about the innovations. For our next panelist is Professor Shane Kilcommins, who's the head of the School of Law at the University of Limerick in Ireland. Professor Shane Kilcommins, welcome. I would first like you to share a bit about your experiences with the pandemic and the challenges that you faced and the institution faced, and also if you can tell us a bit about your institution and about yourself to foreground this.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pandey, and particularly for the invite as well. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. So to begin with, so I work as head of the School of Law at the University of Limerick. I'm a professor there. The University of Limerick Ireland is obviously a small country, it's 5 million people, and the University of Limerick is on the west coast. So between two other cities, Galway and Cork, and it's kind of very close to the Atlantic Ocean. So that's where we're located. We have about 700 undergraduate students, law students, but also criminal justice and policing students, and we have 100 taught postgraduate students, and then perhaps about 32 PhD students. And our law degrees and our programs are accredited by various bodies in the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, England, but also the Bar Council of India, Canada, the New York Bar, and so on. So I'll speak about that in a moment, because that also sometimes presents as a challenge. And so, Professor Pandey, to begin with, we had some of the staff in our school, so we have about 32 academic staff, but about 7 of us already had been teaching online for 4 years on an applied policing program. So we had some knowledge of what was required, but that was only 7 of our staff, of a staff of 32. And I think that, in terms of challenges, the first challenge with online delivery is to do it properly, in my opinion, and based on having done it for the last 4 to 5 years. I've taught by day, face-to-face, but I've also taught online. So the biggest challenge for me is that the workload increases exponentially, that to move online in the first year, in my opinion, I would estimate that it takes 3 times as much work as delivering the same lecture online. So I teach evidence law online, but I also teach it face-to-face. And for me, in the first year, as you transition online, it takes 3 times as much work, because it's an entirely different way of delivering. And so sometimes the university's expectations around that and the knowledge wasn't as big, and it's understandable because not a lot of people have moved online, but that was a challenge, explaining to begin with that as you move online, this is going to have repercussions. It's going to have repercussions for research. It's going to have repercussions in terms of administrative supports and all of the different activities that take place in a university law school. And so we had to kind of manage expectations around that, but also managing staff's expectations to understand that to do this properly, and the students deserve it to be done properly, it does require a lot of preparation in advance. So when the pandemic struck for us in March, we were halfway through our second semester. And so really we were just trying to manage that towards the end. There was a final 4 to 5 weeks that we had to manage. But what we were really doing then was gearing up for the next academic year, which was starting in September, and really, giving people their teaching allocation early, and then planning around that, so to give them as much time as possible. So that's the first big issue, is the workload. And the second issue then, I think, is, choosing the right platforms. And so we for face-to-face teaching, we have a different educational platform than we do online. Some platforms are better online, in my opinion, than others. So for example, I don't know if you use Moodle or if you've come across that platform, found that really good. So it works very well online. And then we have other platforms like Solace or Blackboard and so on, but it's trying to, I think that different platforms can give you different functionality, but also it's the way they manage information on a week-to-week basis. So that's something to be aware of. And then the third issue for us in terms of staff, but also students, was managing consistency. So ensuring, obviously lecturers are autonomous and they should be entitled to give their lectures in a way that they've done in the past, and so they have a flexibility. But at the same time, there needs to be some boundaries around that flexibility so that the students are getting some sort of consistency from module to module. And so we thought a lot about that, we felt that in a particular subject every week, a student should be getting a synchronous component. They should also be getting an asynchronous element. They should also be getting possibly an etivity. and then there should be engagement on a discussion board. Now that wouldn't necessarily, the lecturer wouldn't be doing all of that. You would have moderators that were also supporting, but then the costs go up. Doing it properly, the costs also go up, because you can't expect a lecturer to do the discussion boards, to plan the activities, to do the synchronous and asynchronous components. And so again, it kind of links back about, there have been financial repercussions around that. So it costs a lot more to do it, but that's what we did. And again, you know, advising staff that, look, every week should go up, the materials should go up the Friday, the next academic week, so that, you know, there was consistency around that as well. So that was another challenge. And obviously then there's a challenge for the students, managing their expectations. We've had lots of challenges around exams. So again, because law degrees are accredited, we have to work with our accrediting bodies, and many accrediting bodies want end of term exams. Now, that's not the norm in universities, where many degrees are not accredited, and so it's possible to move entirely to continuous assessment. That wasn't possible for us, but we found that we were having to, there was a lot more negotiation around exams. Students were, for the first time ever, were attempting negotiation when they took place, how long they were for, and so on, because it's an entirely different model. But we then were having to negotiate with other heads of law schools in Ireland to try and ensure consistency, but also then negotiate with the relevant accrediting bodies, particularly in Ireland, and trying to come up with workable solutions. And then there's obviously the security around assessments, the length of time, some of the, and I'll finish on this, Professor Pandey, but then, you know, one of the issues we're encountering is that, you know, parts of Ireland are pretty remote. People have different bandwidth strength. People from different marginalised backgrounds may not have the same technology as other students. And so you're trying to be reasonable and accommodating, whilst also satisfying core criteria or core requirements of a program of study. So probably went on too long there, but thank you for listening to me.
No, thank you. That was very useful, because it sets the, it is, I mean, I'm sure there's resonance with our experiences too. And you have actually thoroughly brought on table all the entire range of challenges that that have been, that we have all faced from wherever we are. There's a resonance. So thank you for bringing all of them in one place. And we'll come back to the insights that these challenges generated. Could I now invite Professor Valentina Volpe to share her thoughts on the challenges, just the experience, the encounters with the pandemic and going into online mode of teaching, and the kind of challenges you faced. To introduce Professor Volpe, she's an Associate Professor of Public International Law and the Co-Director of Human Rights, Security and Development Center at the University of Lille in France. So over to you, Professor Volpe. And do tell us a bit about yourself and your institution too. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and please allow me to thank you very much for this initiative. I think that joining this global conversation, really crossing continents, and at the same time finding so many common problems, and I really think it's enriching having this moment of reflection that forces us as well ourselves to reflect on these common problems. I'm Italian. I'm teaching in France, in Lille, that is on the border with Belgium, 1 hour from Paris and half an hour from Brussels. Our institution is a private one, it's the Lille Catholique University, and as the law school in particular has an important department that is the International and European Law School, where we fundamentally have mostly an Anglo-Saxon format. It means that we teach in English for the great part of our master courses and one licence, so donc bachelor. And we have an enormous number of visiting professors. That in normal time is a great asset, of course, but in pandemic time, this is also a bit of a liability. And this is probably also part of the challenges that I met as co-director of a master program. So concerning the general challenges, I generally think that pandemic work as a catalyzer and an accelerator of reforms that have been long awaited, so to say. I mean, overnight, we really had to learn things that we probably were saying we would have done at a certain point, learning how to use platform, learning how to do really proper online teaching, and this happened in a very short time. And of course, timing has been one of the great challenges, and learning the instruments, the platforms, understanding Zoom, Teams, all nouns that now we all know, but at that time it sounded quite new to me at least. And one of the great challenges, of course, has been adapting curriculum that were thought for in-person teaching to online teaching. Moreover, in France, at least for us, I don't know for Professor Julian, but semesters are much shorter than in other parts of the world. So to me, it meant really, I mean, maybe even luckily to a certain under a certain point, that great part happened online and just the last section happened, in person, and just the last section was online. But this meant, of course, having all the exam sessions that also Professor Shane mentioned to be really transformed in a very, very short amount of time. So this transformation that happened in such immediate, I would say, time frame, the change of pedagogy that you have to adopt, because of course the pedagogy you adopt online is not the same you adapt in person, and this requires a lot of work. And this lack of timing of adaptation for me has been the biggest challenge. And as director of a master program, having numerous visiting professors is an additional element of challenge. Because of course the consistency element that Professor Shane was mentioning before was there, was also how to ensure that so many professors coming from so many different parts of the world could have a common framework for framing their work, for framing their evaluations, for having common policies in terms of readings, in terms of time hours, for example. We decided to shorten them. Considering that the time we have online is not the same time we have in person. So we decided that instead of 60 minutes, we adapt 50 minutes to have a certain limits of readings, to have a certain, to enlarge the calendar, for example, for this first semester, trying to modulate weeks that would not be too long for the students. So somehow this kind of adjustment have been necessary and have been a kind of lessons learned from the first experience we had in the first half of the year.
Thank you, and we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that in the next round when we look at the learning and the insights that we could work with for the future while the pandemic lasts and then beyond the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to that. A second round of deliberating on those. I will now invite my colleague. Who is also an associate professor at the Jindal Global Law School, Professor Jhuma Sen. Professor Sen, please tell us a bit about yourself and how the institution, as you saw, was adapting to the changed circumstances, and then what was the experience you had both in the spring semester and in the fall semester when we went completely online. And the challenges experienced by you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shruti. It's this semester has been not just this semester. I was like earlier chatting with the others that we have been we are continuing with remote teaching since March now. It's and we were one of the earliest ones to go online, which in hindsight, which was a good thing, because it gave us a lot of time to, at least it bought us some time to explore technological options, also understand and learn from our own experiences. I'll come to it in a bit. I teach either constitutional law or criminal law. It usually alters between these two, and I also teach. I've also taught in last semester and this semester. I've been teaching an elective. I have also been associated with clinical legal education, legal drafting in the university. So I think the challenges that I have faced in these past 2 semesters will largely heavily draw from my own observations teaching with or being associated with the teaching of these courses. And I think I can't, not just I think we can't really, we can't repeat enough how COVID-19 pandemic has transformed the face of legal education. And I think it is also sharply brought into focus some of the existing challenges that legal education was dealing with in the pre-COVID world. Those have just like sort of, brought into, those have become more prominent now. And I will give examples of the last two semesters to explain this. But before, before I speak about my own experiences of the challenges that I and many of my colleagues, faced and had to sort of, navigate, I think we also need to acknowledge that we are still very much an elite space for the, 1 to 2%, and the digital divide largely has proved to be extremely costly for higher education, especially in the public education system. And now there are already some very insightful reports on how this has impacted the more marginalized communities, and it has drawn into sharp focus the rural and urban divide. So that is there. I think we need to acknowledge that, and then sort of try to think about our own collective experiences in Jindal as well as in other universities. So this is all how it started. We designed a really exciting. I remember I was actually on leave, last fall semester, 2019 fall semester, and very excited to come back and join. I was teaching Constitutional Law 1, which is a very exciting subject to teach. We had, and this was this was supposed to be taught in a traditional classroom space, and we had a lot of excitement. It's an exciting time to teach and learn constitutional law as well. And in the middle of all that, very exciting classroom discussions, we were forced to yank ourselves, onto online, remote teaching. Which meant that we had to, I think it is pretty much when I say that I think I can speak for pretty much everyone globally who have had to sort of, go through this. It is probably a common experience. We had to think on our feet. We had to overnight, suddenly we had to sort of, transform or, change the contours of, a course which was designed for a traditional classroom space into, into remote learning, something which not many of us were comfortable with. Technological challenges aside, and there were technological challenges, and this does not just include internet. This also includes electricity. We had a lot of many students as well as faculty. There were issues with electricity, there were issues with internet. Then there was the issue with the technological interface that we were using. Then on top of that, sometime in May, there was a cyclone of massive proportion, Amphan, which struck parts of Bengal and Orissa. And our students were already gone back home, students as well as faculty. It proved very difficult because there was no internet for days. In some parts, electricity hadn't, hadn't sort of, come back. So there was the question of natural calamity as well. So there is a pandemic, you're trying to teach, there are technological barriers, there is natural calamity, and there is all this thing about learning to deal with things, learning to sort of think on your feet. Then, of course, there were illnesses, and that illnesses of students, illnesses of their family members, and we also had to, think that the students had gone back home, so they were, they had to deal with multiple challenges. They had other responsibilities, household chores, and the like. So obviously, so that was another challenge. Illness also included, Zoom fatigue or, Zoom or Teams induced migraine. I have had students, come and tell me that, I'm actually, I have migraine. I can't, I can't stare into the screen. I can't even I can't even follow the recorded lectures later because I can't just see what do I do. So these were some of the challenges, and I think another challenge that we had to kind of sort of reckon with was that not all subjects allow themselves to be sort of muted to remote teaching. And I think one classic example is clinical legal education, and that has taken a hit. Last semester I was a course coordinator for drafting, legal drafting, pleading, and conveyancing, which is a Bar Council mandated clinical course, and I had to hear from colleagues struggling to teach it because how do you actually have a clinic on online. It was it was proving to be very difficult to conduct that. But like I said, one of the pros of moving to remote technology early on was that it brought us some time to experiment and also learn from our experiences collectively. Now, as far as online education goes, I think we're still largely, I'm speaking for myself. I think we're still largely in uncharted territory. So a lot of it is still learning as we go. And to sort of like borrow from what many others are saying, the pandemic is like a portal. I like to see the pandemic as a portal, which has historically forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. So when I was designing curriculum for the for the physically distanced semester, I did keep that in mind, and I actually discussed this with students in advance that I wanted to experiment with pedagogy quite a bit this semester. And this was after last semester's, which was a little chaotic, relatively more chaotic for us. And I told them that learning law in the pandemic would mean that I will adopt an assortment of strategies to teach, and I will expect them to help me in navigating these strategies, so that they have a better learning experience. And I think that actually helped in the long run, although this is easier said than done, because my biggest lesson from the spring semester was not to treat online classroom like a traditional classroom. I made that mistake in the spring semester, and because it is next to impossible to replicate the traditional classroom experience and expect lively class discussions online. And most colleagues have actually found it very difficult to engage students and encourage participation in the traditional way. There are other associated challenges for the instructor or the faculty, like multitasking, for example, because you're trying to, you're trying to, manage class discussion, you're trying to control the chat function, you're trying to teach, you're trying to move slides, there's like a whole assortment of things, you're trying to do that. So I made peace with the fact that online learning is difficult. It's difficult, and it is very different from traditional classroom teaching. And I tried to be more of a facilitator of discussion than an instructor. And
I think that's a great. Let me stop you there, Jhuma, because we can then now this takes us to how we what we take from these experiments and how we coped so far. What do we take in terms of some enduring changes in the way we teach? And how do we see our role as teachers changing with the situation in hand, but also in the longer term, because of the fact that we have knowledge is now being delivered in a different way, irrespective of the pandemic. And as another of our panelists pointed out, that this was long overdue in any case, and the pandemic just forced us to adapt which is what Professor Valentina Volpe said, that this was anyway something that we should have been doing, that we just had to do it in a very short span of time. So I think amongst the four of you, you have highlighted the fact that the multi-pronged challenges that the pandemic threw. The fact that this was a surprise, we were caught unawares. There was very little time to adapt, to learn, to understand the technology and the learning platform. Then the consistency challenges that were thrown with completely going online, and the learning outcomes being looking at how they were kept intact, managing expectations, managing the emotional and mental health issues and other health issues within the family from the pandemic, access to technology and financial repercussions and other infrastructural aspects. And then, of course, the fact that all of you said in different ways that the workload increased exponentially. So there were we had to multitask. The amount of time we were spending on teaching and on delivering the classes went very, very high, and that was a challenge in itself. And I think I think that can take us to the next round of very quick responses from you in terms of what do these experiments and these journeys tell us in terms of what we take forward even while the pandemic and its impact lasts, but in the longer term. And as Jhuma said, just to use that as a plug. So how do we change the way we see ourselves as teachers? Do we become facilitators when knowledge is easily available online, and most of the students are able to look for information? What's the niche that we occupy as teachers that is still not available to students with all the access to the online information through technology? So I would like each one of you to share your thoughts on the takeaways and any other insights very, very quickly in maybe 2-3 minutes each. And any of you can go first. Jhuma, you were saying something, so why don't you start and we can go in the reverse order. You were saying something about being a facilitator, and I stopped you there, I'm sorry. So maybe you can just continue to talk with that and we can just go. So just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, so
because we are
yeah, so I'll be quick. Yeah, so I was talking about that, how it forced us to become facilitators, from teachers or instructors to facilitators overnight.
Right.
And I think one of the reason for that is that the online classroom, they shifted the focus from teaching to learning. That is from the instructor to the students. And when our university, we had there's this academic policy, COVID academic policy that was circulated that did emphasize that the emphasis should be on learning, on sort of, it should be student centered, etc. So the first step to design any curriculum would be to sort of effectively allow that, have a curriculum that kind of which can sort of allow that space where the instructor is more of a facilitator and the the sort of the focus is on the learner. So then the question is that how does one then design a learning centered curriculum? So I felt it was more useful to have a student-centered kind of design and keep traditional lectures and Socratic method, which we use in a regular classroom setting, to a minimum. This would mean that a sort of like if you're thinking about a student-centered design, this means that we have to we were forced to sort of factor in a number of conditions which would mediate student learning experience. And this could range from distractions, like I was earlier saying, distractions that they may face at home because they're all learning at home, and these may be something this may be a household chore or a family member who fell ill, or and consequently they may have shorter attention spans, and I teach undergraduate students, and they, in any case, they have a shorter attention span than than a graduate level student. So I think once someone acknowledges these realities, it is much easier to design that curriculum. So what I did was, I had a lot of, I'll just wrap it up. I had a lot of audiovisual tools, including podcasts, and I've even used, on one occasion, I've even used films. For example, I've used Netflix as a watch party function, and I've used it for the the trial of Chicago 7, when we were, I was teaching law of crimes this semester. So before we started discussing confessions, we had a screening, and the film had just come up, and the students loved it. We had a very, very engaging discussion. Along with that, and this was something I actually took a leaf from the the COVID the policy in academic policy that was shared earlier. Use the flipped classroom method. So sometimes I would give video, I would sort of record it very short, 7-minute recorded lectures in advance, so that they go through it, they listen to it, and then they know what the lecture is going to be all about. I found it futile to expect that students would read like they would sort of read and prepare for in a regular traditional classroom space for a Socratic method. But of course, this is something I think which is more doable in certain kind of for certain kind of subjects. It is not as easy for others, and I've seen how clinics have suffered, and it's an experience.
Thank you, Jhuma. Let me invite Professor Volpe to share her insights on what we have learned from this for the way forward in just a couple of minutes, please.
It never happened in my life to receive so many requests of help from my students. Concerning mental health, first of all, they feel depressed, panic attacked. They are really looking for me in a guiding role that is not my classroom teaching role, but is still a fundamental role today for me. And I really think that we are rediscovering our guiding role beyond legal education, so to say, but nonetheless part of our educational role. And this is something that's really made me think a lot. Then on the long run, I really think that the full potential of online education will come after the COVID crisis, when we will be able to break up the linkage between online education and COVID as a kind of emergency tool, and in reality really unveil the potential of something that has a great liberating for me dimension as well, the possibility of breaking time barriers, of breaking geographical boundaries, and to offer affordable education, quality education, without necessarily having to move yourself, without necessarily having to go in certain parts of the world. So, but in a first phase, probably we will have to rediscover again how beautiful it is to be back in a class with our students. But after this class, I think we will be able to find again the great potential, the liberating potential that there is in online classes.
That's beautiful. That's very beautiful. Beautifully said, the liberating potential. Professor Kilcommins, would you like to share your insights on what we take away from these experiences and the journeys?
And I would echo what my colleague has just said. And actually, what's really struck me over the last couple of weeks is it's a French philosopher, Michel Foucault. So I can align with my European colleague. But he talked about, in the 18th and 19th centuries, how we created these specialist enclaves, these specialist sites, and there was a massive expansion in their use. And I think university education has been like that. And what we've done over time is we've brought students into that specialist enclave, that locus, and taught them there. But what has really struck me is the liberating potential, but for me, it's the emancipatory potential. And when I look at the University of Limerick, so we have lots of international students. So that's very high, but most of our students from Ireland were from the region. So they were tending to come, to be from around the city and, in neighboring counties. But what the online platform does for us is it gives us a power and reach far beyond all corners of Ireland. Now it's still small, but it means that we're, have the potential to reach cohorts of students, but also professional cohorts that previously wouldn't even think of doing a course because it didn't comply with their work requirements and so on. And online learning has huge emancipatory potential, and it can change the profile and dynamic of the cohorts of students coming to university. It also changes away from thinking about programs to bespoke modules and so on. So I think that it's going to be, and it also takes us out of that requirement to be in a particular locus. So that's my big, I suppose, learning that I've taken from all of this.
Right. Wow. So from liberating potential to emancipatory potential, the pandemic has been a boom. It's a boon, it seems. Could I request Professor Julian to say something about the learning and the insights from this experience, and then go into the Q&A. Yes.
So, well, I definitely share what my two colleagues have just said, Mrs. Volpe and Mr. Professor Kilcommins. I think, yeah, what we learned from the pandemic is, of course, what Professor Kilcommins said, we have the capacity maybe to reach further, students who live further, but also I think the pandemic, from what we saw here, really increased the inequalities. We had real issues with some students who had poor connectivity where they lived or no connection at all, so they had to come to the university library for this connectivity, or students who didn't have a correct tablet, to have Zoom or whatever software. So I think this also something that was really pointed out through this pandemic. Now, considering the takeaway, I think there are definitely some lessons to be learned, and teaching legal language, I was a bit skeptical on, the possibility of real interaction to teach languages especially, but I realized there were some, actually positive things to be taken, yet I still think that in the future, I definitely use a form of blended learning, but I think the experiential learning is something you can't do without, especially learning languages. And I think we have to rethink the way we convey the knowledge. Insist maybe more on the critical mind and the analytical things, rather than just, asking students to learn by heart, which is often done when you teach law here in France. So, having them work more their critical skills and analytical skills, perhaps more than we did in the past. And, but keep the, the interaction and the, like when we teach our students how to do moods, in English, I think that's something that it's really necessary to be done, face to face and with, the human interaction. So I've mixed feelings, I could say, about this experience. Definitely there are some things to be kept and to be reused, and that are definitely positive. But I think nothing will replace this face-to-face contact. And as my colleague said, I'm looking forward to, meet my student again, but definitely with a different angle, different perspective on teaching. Thank you.
That's a great conclusion, note of conclusion to this. Just this reflection. I think that we'll continue to reflect, and I think the pandemic is not over. And like Professor Volpe said, that we will rediscover when this phase is finally getting over. But certainly it looks like this pandemic has catalyzed and accelerated changes that were anyway, we could see them on the horizon, but we were not able to adapt. And the pandemic forced us to do that in a very short span of time, which was challenging. But the fact that now we are looking at how in the new era, not just the pandemic era, but the new knowledge era that we are in, with the ability, the role of technology, our role as teachers changes from to being facilitators and to being guides and to being emotional anchors and support to our students, to imparting knowledge in more critical and analytical ways. And the fact that we have now we can transcend, we can see, we've seen that we can transcend space barriers and time barriers. And so our capacities are certainly much larger. They have been enhanced. And that has been confirmed from this experience, and I just love the way that we talked about the liberating potential and the emancipatory potential of the learning that the pandemic has given us through these 2 semesters. I would just, I think we are doing well on time, but we have just enough time to take some questions.
That has come from, I'm not able to see the name, but basically the question is about to what extent regulatory bodies have any say in curriculum design during online classes. Anybody can take it, maybe share, is the government also, like for example, at least in India, the University Grants Commission has provided some guidelines as to certain reduction in the curriculum when it comes, and also even change the pedagogy and approach towards learning. Is that something, all of you can respond to that question.
Yeah.
I'm happy to just say very quickly on that. Because our degree programs, because law degree programs are professionally recognized and accredited, you are going to have oversight. And that sometimes can be a challenge. I found it a challenge this semester because we say, for example, the Bar Council of Ireland was looking for end of term exams in all of the compulsory modules. Now, end of term exams are difficult because we can't bring students on site. And so then there's a resource issue around how do we invigilate when we can't bring them on site. And there are huge costs associated with that, particularly, and it will always have to be externally sourced, but particularly as well if you're looking, if there's large numbers in a class, let's say, for example, criminal law or contract law. So what we did in the end is we had to make a decision is that we will have end of term exams, but also to ensure that students weren't marginalized, in terms of bandwidth, in terms of technology, we had to try and give them increased periods of time, 24 hours and so on, and they're all take home. So it is changing the way, there's a negotiation element to it, but there's also, as a university, we have a responsibility to our students to ensure that they have proper access. We also have to try and ensure the integrity of the exams. I personally don't see, and again, we talked about transformations in terms of how we, away from the university or that site, that enclave. Again, I think that sometimes some of our exams are very focused on rote learning, that you learn it down. I personally don't, and again, over the last 4 to 5 years, using online, I don't see a huge difficulty in our learning outcomes not being achieved by giving students take-home end-of-term exams in addition to continuous assessments, because that would be very much, that will mirror practice as well. So I hope that's answered the question. But it is a negotiation. You have to negotiate with the accrediting bodies, and you have to negotiate with your university to try and achieve, I suppose, proper quality as regards the integrity of the exams.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Kilcommins. Would any of any other panelists like to answer that?
Maybe I can just say a word. Just for the pre-bar exam that we were having in November and which is going on at the moment, we were allowed to go on site. So the students were there for the oral, especially for the oral exams. And so for that part, there were some exception made by the government to allow them to come on site for these, but only for these pre-bar exam. The rest will be fully online.
Right.
Well,
so, yeah. Yes. Please go ahead.
No, I may have a limited, in any case, picture probably of the whole issue, but in France, and maybe at least this is my impression, probably Professor Julian can confirm or not, in any case, the space of maneuver of university is somehow limited at a certain extent. I mean, there is quite a regulation. Of course, we have a accredited system as well in France. So, of course, there should be a supervision in the moment in which you should launch, for example, new programs. This is the moment where you would have. But in these cases, if I think about our university, we really follow the instruction of the government. So in the first part, of course, the guidelines that were given. And then in the moment in which we switch online 100% was the moment in which all France was switching online. So so somehow the space of maneuver was limited. There were also universities that decided in advance to switch online 100%, or at least part of the courses, and these were the little margin you may have. Yeah.
Right. So I think nimbleness and negotiations would be key. They would play a key role in this.
There's one more question. There's one question regarding, I suppose some of you touched it in the course of your discussions. Maybe I can ask Dr. Julian. This question is, not all students are equally technologically adept, even if they have the requisite wherewithal. In these circumstances, how effective will the online experiments be? How are universities going to make sure that students are equally comfortable with technology?
That's right. So there are a whole and Raj, thank you for so now I have the questions. So apart from the regulatory agencies, there is the other important stakeholders are our students, and some of you mentioned about adapting to making our learning more student-centered. But how do we balance the emotional health issues and the psychological pressure, as well as the learning curve that even students are forced to negotiate in this transition? A whole lot of questions are around that. So how do we manage the expectations and the special needs of the students in this transition? And any of you can go first.
So Professor Pandey, I actually have to go, but I would like to answer that question quickly, and I would like to come into a point that Professor Julian mentioned earlier. So obviously there are resources and technology issues, but I also think, and it goes back to Professor Julian's point, is that there are also challenges for academic members of staff. You know, as a teacher for 25 years, I get an energy from teaching face to face. There's an energy with it. There's a you know, a dynamism with it. It is actually, and I think there's research now available to say that lecturing online is much more exhausting because you know, sometimes you're not getting that energy back from a class. So it's something, I mean, obviously we have to think about it. The challenges with online are from the resource perspective for students, but it's also the labor of staff and how it is a different form. I mean, yes, we talked about it being emancipatory and liberating, but it is also, it can be very exhausting for staff. And I think we're going to have to develop good work practices around that as well. So I have to leave now. It's been an absolute pleasure. And
thank you very much for your time and for sharing your insights so candidly. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you. I think we are anyway running short of time, so we have just a couple of minutes. If anyone wants to say something that we have not been able to cover, I would welcome your thoughts for just next 2 minutes. Any of the panelists around the themes that we discussed, and also just hand-holding the students through this transition. So clearly there are increased demands on us and the exhaustion and the energy levels challenges, but also the challenges that we need to also support our students with, which are of similar nature. If any of you has any insights on that.
Well, maybe I can just follow up on certain things that I mentioned before. I mean, today I see my role much more as a mentoring role, I must say, and providing this kind of support that I see they need so much, and that really goes beyond legal education. And I really think that also the university has a role in that, and I'm really grateful that our university put in place a mental support service as well, and an economic support service. So we are a private institution, but we know also that COVID crisis affects families, not just students. So there may be, of course, great economic issues that are the second step, economic issues affecting our students. And of course, COVID brought away from our students all the good reasons to be 20, traveling, getting out, meeting friends. So it's really a bad moment to be in your 20s today. And I really feel that our role is really trying to keep the enthusiasm that being in your 20s should bring with. So I really think that this is, you know, challenging who we are as teachers, and this is the good question I think you asked before.
That's a perfect. That's the perfect final word for this session. I think that none of us can run away from the fact that these are very challenging times, and we need to rise over and above the call of our duty. But also that there are many potential in the changes that we can see, and we would be able to work with them in the future. So I'm I'm really grateful to all of you for making time for this conversation, for being here with us, for being so generous in your sharing. And we look forward to continuing this conversation in a reflective mode. Thanks all of you again, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much, Shruti, and thank you, Dr. Julian, and thank you, of course, Professor Volpe and my colleague Jhuma, and thank you to Professor Sean Kilcommins for all of your presence and participation. I look forward to seeing you at our campus in India sometime.